All right, I've got 12:31 p.m. Eastern time in the US, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining our session. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone across the country and across the globe. Thank you for being here. Our session today is called Playing in the Sandbox Together, or Can I Help You with That? The team that is presenting to you today is from Wells Fargo. We are very excited to be here, and we're going to get going with some brief introductions. So, Susie, would you like to take it away on your intro?
Certainly, and thank you so much for that, Ryan. My name is Susie Asmar-O'Gwyn. I use the pronouns she, her, hers. I am the internal Net Promoter System leader for human resources at Wells Fargo Advisors, or Wells Fargo in my day job. I just left Advisors a year ago. And I also serve as the Enterprise VP for the Pride Connection ERN. Thrilled to be here with all of you today.
Awesome. Thank you, Susie.
Hey, sorry, Ryan. Everyone, I'm Jeff Engler. I am in the Consumer and Small Business Banking division within Wells Fargo. I'm a senior vice president with the vague title of Operational Initiatives Manager. What I do is manage a lot of our risk transformation activities within this line of business. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a cisgender gay man, and I am the president of the Pride Connection ERN, and looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And William.
Hello, everyone. My name is William Crook. I am in my day job, a fraud and claims operations specialist at Wells Fargo. I work in ATM and debit card claims. And in my gay job, I am the transgender engagement chair for our Pride Connection ERN. I'm a non-binary woman. I'm a bi-lesbian. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns.
Awesome. Thanks, William. And last but hopefully not least, my name is Ryan Rosa. I work in wealth investment management in process measurement, where I lead strategy and execution of process measurement for that business group. In my queer job, I am the Enterprise Workforce Outcomes co-chair for our Pride Connection ERG. So I focus on developing, engaging, recruiting, and retaining talent in the LGBTQ plus segment, both our talent that we already have in the company and talent that we can hopefully recruit from outside the company. I identify as transgender and gender fluid. I also identify as bisexual. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. All right, so you know a little bit more about us now. Let's talk a little bit about why we're here. Well, first, if I remember the order of our presentation, which is clearly a challenge at this point on Friday in Summit. Here's just a quick review of, our commitment as Wells Fargo as a company to our community, really. Back in 1987, Wells Fargo added sexual orientation to our EEO and non-discrimination policies, which compared to a lot of companies and governments, that's pretty early in the game. And in 2004, gender identity and expression were also added to the non-discrimination policy, which again, was fairly early in the game compared to the discourse and conversation that we're having now in 2021. We have launched a number of toolkits around gender transitioning and non-binary employees in the workplace. And we've signed on to a few amicus briefs in the last decade around marriage equality. And most recently last year in the Bostock case for Title VII protections for folks, for employees on gender identity and expression and sexual orientation being added to workplace non-discrimination laws. All right, so now we're actually going to talk about why we're here. So Wells Fargo is going through a major change in how we're organizing around our DE&I work, how our ERG is organized. And while we're kind of transforming from an approach that a lot of companies are taking and shifting their ERGs to really a BRG or a BERG. And if you're not familiar with the BRG or BERG terms, it's a business and employee resource group or a business resource group. And really the point there is for the ERGs to really transform into meeting the needs and demands of the business that our ERGs existed, and supporting business outcomes and not just employee outcomes. Well, at Wells Fargo, we are really kind of segmenting that work out between a new group, diverse segments, representation, and inclusion in our overall DE&I structure. Our head of DSRI reports directly to our CEO. And beyond that, we're putting DSRI leaders in many of our major lines of business across the company. And then we also have our ERGs, which play a significant role in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in our company and out in the community at large. And so you can already kind of think like, whoa, that's a lot of areas to try and manage all of these work streams from. How do we keep that organized? How do we, not step on each other's toes? How do we really align to strategy across a company our size when we have so many different hands in the pot trying to make a difference? And so that's really what we're here to talk about today. And it's not just to solve, it's not just a Wells Fargo problem, right? We see that all of our companies are organizing very differently around DE&I work. And so we hope that this discussion that we're going to have today, this is going to be a very interactive discussion, is going to be helpful for all of you in thinking about how we can better organize around this work, how we make sure everyone's educated and on the same page and all of those sorts of things. So that's really why we're here today. We hope that you're going to really get some meaningful learnings out of this just as much as we do. We are recording this session. We are taking notes that we will post afterwards in each of the 4 kind of discussion or conversation topics that we're going to go through today, so that everyone can take this information away if you find it valuable and take it back to your companies and use it too. So with that, I believe I'm going to be handing it off to my colleague, Susie, to take us through our first conversation.
Hey, Ryan, Susie, can I just add one other thing before we get started? So thanks, yes. Ryan, great overview. I would add, even within our company, and again, I suspect this is the case in many others, it even gets a little bit more complex because we have a marketing organization that has folks dedicated to diverse segments. Communications, we have external communications that has folks dedicated to diverse segments. So you can clearly see there's a lot of hands in the pot. And I just wanted to make sure everybody knows we're delighted to have all of these people involved, because the more D&I work that we're doing, the better, for our community and for all the diverse communities across the company. But it can get really complicated, as you can clearly see, right? There's a lot of people that have to coordinate. Some people have budgets, some people don't have budgets, right? If they're not communicating with each other correctly, or understanding what each other are doing, there's some, overlap that can certainly occur, redundancy. So we're happy about having this, sort of plethora of people doing this work, but it's just figuring out how we kind of, as we said in the title, how do we all work together to make it the most effective, efficient, and, meaningful work that we're doing. So I certainly wanted to make sure everybody knows it's not, again, it's a good problem to have, but it is something that is a challenge that we're kind of working our way through as we transform. So sorry, Susie, I didn't mean to kind of cut you off there, but I just wanted to add a little bit of more color to what Ryan shared.
No, I think that's really important context, Jeff, and I'm glad you jumped in to share that. There is a lot of complexity. When I think about a sandbox, there are a lot of people in a sandbox. There are a lot of grains of sand in a sandbox, and obviously the goal is to somehow shape brick and mortar out of that sand with the people that are in that sandbox with you. It's about building the ultimate sandcastle, if you will. And to do that, you have to strive for collaboration. You have to build a functional, healthy community. And you have to somehow figure out how to take that sand, which are all of these efforts, all of this potential that's represented there, and utilize it to drive those D&I efforts with the people that are in that sandbox with you. And I think, you know, Jeff, you really stated it well. There are so many different areas within our organization that are trying to do wonderful things from a DE&I perspective. And now we have to organize ourselves to really get to that sandcastle, that ultimate goal in the mix. So, you know, today what I'd really like to do, and I think all of us are going to do, is get your engagement, get your perspective, your experiences, your, you know, challenges and best practices, so that we can package all of that and share that back with each of you, and selfishly bring it into our organization. You know, that's, I think, the beauty of what we're all trying to do here at Summit. So I'm going to try to toss out some questions, and obviously I can't call on people. There are too many of you, but I suspect there are a few of you out there that are not very shy. And we'll start to jump in, and the rest of you can pull on those threads, and hopefully we can enter into a very healthy discussion here. So, you know, one of the things, of course, is that when you have so many people in the mix, it can lend itself to duplicative or unaligned work. And that's going back to what Ryan brought up and what Jeff brought up. We're trying to move in the same direction. What has been your experience in that space with that duplication of work? How have you tried to figure out how to harness the power of all of these people trying to do the same thing, but it's very different work streams and numerous work streams at that?
And feel free to use the Zoom chat. Feel free to jump in off of mute via voice if you'd like, or also feel free to use the Pathable chat.
Oh, folks are saying that they can't unmute. Did you mute all, Susie?
I don't think I have that power.
So folks are muted when they come into the session, but if you would like to speak, if you could raise your hand through the reaction at the bottom of the Zoom, we'll be able to see you and we can unmute you ourselves. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
The voice in the sky. It's terrific.
All right, so we've got some responses coming in through the chat here. I'll just start to read some out. Megan Payne says, turns out they didn't know the work was being duplicated, so I went to them and told them so, and asked if we could work together. Regular communication. Thank you, Lisa. Ashley Nezevich, our marketing team is focused on consumer perspective, and we're focused on both consumer and potential employee, plus the internal team members. So it's aligning the messages so they appeal to everyone without watering things down. Very nice. Alex Wynn says leveraging technology, project management tools like OKR tracking tools such as Workboard. Cypress Stewart says not fracturing efforts and look for ways to amplify. Shelby Perkins, we've got letting go of ego and needing to be in control of certain efforts. From Adam Bernard, I know we get frustrated hearing about efforts in the marketing and communication space after they happen rather than keeping us in the loop. Relatable. The only real solution is ongoing communication and introducing yourself to new staffers. Love that.
That's terrific. I mean, William, thank you for reading some of those. I'm going to just interject for a second.
Please jump in.
Kind of organizing some of what it is I'm seeing, obviously preempting the finding out about something afterward. That lends itself to maybe something like a forum, a different platform that maybe isn't established, not just the sort of siloed communications that seem to be happening. Has anyone had an experience where there is some kind of a forum that's been used to preempt some of the chaos that naturally happens when everyone is swirling and with a lot of energy and a lot of, passion to accomplish something?
And Susie, Michael Roman has a hand raised, so I don't want to ignore the hand raising there. Michael, do you want to go? Can you unmute yourself?
I'm asking Michael to unmute now.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
And Michelle, I also saw you. So
Can
after
you hear
Michael,
me?
you can jump in.
We can
Yep,
hear you now.
we got you,
Michael.
Michael.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I realize I'm part of the leadership team that's presenting today, and I really wasn't part of the agenda that you're putting together, but I have two comments. One is that traditionally ERNs has been seen more of the grassroots effort bottom up. And then we have a lot of the top down coming from the corporation, whether it's HR or community affairs and other places. And what's been missing from my experience is that coordination in the middle. And now corporations are investing a lot of money in their DE&I initiatives or DSRI, whatever they're calling it, the diversity departments. And I think that they bear some of the responsibility of doing the coordination. And I think we need to impress upon them to be the hub or the traffic cop for all of these initiatives. And if not, as someone else said in the chat, if there is something we are doing, it's also up to us to communicate out to the different constituents. So we're not doing duplication of effort. So I don't know if that's kind of what the discussion's about. And I know we're starting to make inroads there, and we've got close communications with our communications and marketing group. But again, even you've got to put a council together that includes all of the groups, not the ones that we communicate with frequently. So that would be my feedback.
Thank you, Michael. And I think I heard Michelle has a hand raised. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes, I do. Can I get an audio check? Can you hear me okay? Or should I go to a headset?
No, we can hear you great.
We've got you.
Okay. We have a couple of observers in the room. One is my partner and the other is my dog. In any event, one of the things that we've done to handle that at Merck is we have something called the EBRG Bridge. And what it is just became this month a full-time position for someone who kind of oversees the EBRGs and gets us together. One of the things we did was a year ago now, past December, before COVID, was we had our first intersectionality happy hour. Because up until that point, for the most part, we were all working in silos, which was very tough. I was able to break some of that because I did run two EBRGs, or ERGs, whatever you want to call them, our Rainbow Alliance, and then also our capability network. So I was able to bring those two together, and it also made it easier from a budget standpoint to move money back and forth, because we actually had our own managed budget for each of the ERGs, which was kind of neat. But the thing is to get out of silos. I work in a very large company, Merck, with operations all over the world. However, I'm at a very small site in Elkton, Virginia, where it's pretty conservative around here, to say the least. So that makes for some challenges as well. And having leaders who really support you. My leader, great leader, actually, but he has asked that I get input for my EBRG objectives from someone who is more familiar with what I do, rather than himself, who's so busy with my day job. Because my day job is learning and development, and my day job is 2 ERGs and also global team for transgender advocacy within Merck. So just a couple of ideas.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. Really appreciate it. And the perspective of large organizations, obviously, the bigger they are, the unwieldier they can be. And you having shared that experience, I think, is very helpful for us, and obviously for some of the other large organizations here. So trying to take a peek in the chat, and again, thank you all for sharing what's working. Derek, I jumped on the term DEI traction team. Love that. And you know, many of you are swirling around these regular meetings with leaders, ensuring that you've got that leadership support, as you stated, Michelle. Obviously, these different groups and work streams also introduce the very hairy aspect of territory and politics. I am curious how many of you would be willing to share any of your experiences in navigating an environment that can sometimes obviously be a little bit challenging, despite everyone trying to ensure that they're collaborating and building that sandcastle together. There are obviously times where there can be more of a toxic situation that presents itself. And so curious about your experiences there. And I think we're going to then shift to some of the other topics that we really want to make sure that we touch on today.
And Susie, Britta has a hand raised, so I don't know if Britta, you want to respond to that, or what other comments you might have had. I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the folks that have raised their hands too.
Thanks. I think what I was going to say kind of works with that line of thought. At my company, we've recently been struggling a little bit with our diversity, equity, and inclusion group versus our employee resource groups. And, who works for who? The employee resource groups are under DE&I, but we are all volunteers. We're not paid to do any of this work. The DE&I folks are paid to do it, yet, we're used often as a crutch, and there's this weird communication, sometimes mishaps happening. And we're in this really weird space of trying to determine that, we're working through it, but it's really bumpy. It's really sometimes very difficult. And I can't speak, we only have 7 employee resource groups. I can't speak for our other ones. However, for our PACE group, we often feel the brunt of it for whatever reason. And I think that's just because, as everyone knows, what we go through and recognize in this community, it is hard, difficult topics. It's stuff that people don't really want to dig into. It's not as easy as saying, we have 2 women's oriented groups, right? It's not as easy as say, well, hey, I'm gonna join the women's engineering network, and that's a very clear lane and path to be on, as opposed to a pride group. So there's all these weird dynamics at work, and trying to figure out how that relationship should be and versus what it actually is.
Britta, I think you definitely nailed one of the big question marks for us too. It's the working agreements, the roles, the responsibilities. I think as ERNs being primarily volunteers, and certainly in our organization, it's all volunteer in the ERNs, but I know that some organizations treat that differently. It's a little bit of that that push and that pull. There's information that's being fed to us by the enterprise or the broader D&I organization. There are different councils within our different business verticals that also are pushing things toward us. And then we're obviously trying to represent, voices. We're trying to remain responsive and accessible and be somewhat of that focus group to feed what's happening within D&I or to feed what's happening within the LOB Council. So it is an interesting dynamic, and I appreciate you having brought that up. I'd hoped somebody would just throw that out there, and you naturally did. I see one more hand raised, and I'll call on that, and then maybe we'll pivot and see where the conversation goes. But I think you all can tell we're going to be very happy to bounce back and forth. The idea here is, what can we all take out of this? So thank you all for being vocal. So Malia, if I can call on you and see what you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm in a really unique position in that I founded my Pride ERG this year and launched it, and then leveraged that into my company's first paid DEI position. So now I am both the only paid DEI leader and also the volunteer chair. And so I kind of, as we talked about those dynamics of like the volunteered versus paid and running into those obstacles. And so I have some perspective as a role in each. And for anyone here who is in a paid DEI position, I'm going to encourage you to go to your volunteers and ask them how you as a paid employee can retain them. And have that courageous conversation and reach out and say, what can I do to retain you because you're a volunteer? And it's important that your voice is heard. And I think that'll go so far in building that relationship and opening up that door for those volunteers to say, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, or do you know anyone that can help me? And as those paid employees, we are uniquely positioned to have that much broader sight and say, okay, well, I know you're overwhelmed, but I know this ERG over here has an excellent resource, and let's drive that intersectionality and have that resource from a different group come to you and help. So I wanted to start there by, as a paid employee, we have a lot of power. This is our full-time job. We got the energy to do it. Support and back your volunteers. And for the folks that were mentioning, what do you do in that places of pushback? And I've definitely experienced that pushback and those tensions of figuring out who works for who. My position is brand new. It's existed in my company for less than 60 days. We're definitely going through that growing pain right now. And a lot of what that's looked like for me is coming from a place of asking questions. When you say the goal is this, can you tell me what you mean by that? When someone tells you no, I strongly believe it is just a pathway and a description to a yes. Dive in and ask them why they're telling you no. And 90% of the time, they'll give you a roadmap on how to get them to tell you yes. And if it's not a in good faith argument, then that's something that'll come to light and you can face it head on then versus that bad faith argument living in the shadows and allowing to fester. So it's from my two perspectives as both a volunteer and a paid employee, how we can kind of better work together across those lines.
Well, you are definitely in a unique situation, and congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a terrific accomplishment, both in standing up the group, but also forging the position. Appreciate so much of that feedback, and really, I think we'll take a note from your comment. You know, if you're asking the right questions, you will get what that path forward will be. And I think we can apply that in so many different spaces in our personal lives and in our work lives. So thank you for that, Malia. All right. Oh, I do see another hand raised. Ken?
Hi. So like Malia, I actually started as a lead in our Pride ERG, and that developed into a position in DEI where I actually oversee all of our employee resource groups. Here at Micron, we have 10 ERGs with 80 chapters worldwide and close to 15,000 members participating. The challenge I find is with our company, we have really acknowledged and see how impactful these ERGs are on our business. Therefore, whenever there's a new idea, management wants, the first thing is they want to do, well, let's get the ERGs involved. And I find that our ERGs are really becoming overwhelmed because they're the first place that management goes to when they want an idea of the pulse of something that's happening, or they want to try something new and inventive. But of course, the ERGs are rock stars, so we'll get them to do it. So the challenge I have is how do we give these ERGs the authority to, put their hand up and say, listen, we'd love to do that, but we don't have bandwidth, or, how do I balance that with my day job? Because, in tech, we're always busy and we never have enough time to do our normal job, yet alone this volunteer work as well.
Thank
Awesome.
you so much for that, Ken. I see a lot in the chat, and I know that we'll go back and play these things and try to incorporate it into the notes. I appreciate everything that's being shared there. But let's go ahead and just jump into one of the next angles, and really thinking through things like risk or balancing all of these different workloads or bringing people up to speed. I mean, there are all these different areas we'd really like to touch on today. William, I think that we wanted to see if we could navigate this part of the conversation here.
We sure do. Thank you, Susie. So next up on our little tour is bringing everyone up to speed on the communities in focus. And so for a broad sort of starting point on this one, I thought we could start with some. Let's start with how do y'all address knowledge gaps that may come up when you're doing this work, and it's about actually focusing on the appropriate communities and helping out and doing the good work, and not everybody is necessarily on the same page with that work. So how do you address those knowledge gaps and bringing everybody up to speed, as it were?
And William, maybe like a example
Sure. Sure. So let's see. Like for example, we've had experience where say we're trying to focus more on the transgender community, for example, the transgender, non-binary, and intersex community at Wells Fargo. but maybe not everybody on the enterprise team or in the DE&I space really has a direct connection to that community or an immediate experience with the kinds of issues that we as a community face. And so there are a number of ways to address that, right? And it really comes down to education and to sharing. That can go through, for example, story sharing of saying this has been my experience and these are the kinds of things that I have faced. It can be through resource and sort of filtering down and distilling some important experiences and information and say presenting that to the group. And it could just be like, we have more important things to talk about right now, but here is a list of resources that you can go to and educate yourself, for example, right? Let's see, I see some things coming through in the chat and I want to call them out. And then we can get to you, Andrea. I see your hand raised. Let's see, we have Van Vincent says, I recommend establishing a way to recognize ERG leaders through performance evaluation processes for their volunteer efforts. Okay, I think this is more on the last subject, but we will make sure to pull this whole chat and incorporate it into our summary. Let's see, Cypress Stewart says, we would love to create and implement a new employee training LMS modules. So employees are familiarized with the company's culture of inclusion through participating in ERGs. Love that.
That's great. That's great.
Taylor Fegan, how do we bring it up to D&I that they need to use us rather than ignore us and then get mad when we don't include them in the loop because they don't include us? Ever really great question. These are feelings that we all deal with, right? Michelle Sullivan, again, trans is a huge issue here in the Shenandoah Valley, mostly Republican, and they are opposing the government mandate for gender in schools. Yes, that has been weighing heavy on our minds, I can tell you as well. Britta responds to Taylor, yes, we're expected to hold space for them, but how often do they hold space for us? Okay, so this is moving in a direction that I would love to highlight, and that I think is, again, an open-ended question is whose responsibility is it when we get to these stages where there are knowledge gaps and there are gaps in experience and information. So who's in your experience, whose responsibility is it to do that educating and to do that work, right? Back to the chat. We've got some responses to Justin. Let's see, from Kat Kuniko. I know we'd especially love to be able to give input on trainings. We realize that there's a lot goes into clearing guidelines and employee trainings, but notification about a module is too late to give input on how things come across. That's totally true. Which is why it's important for our voices to be included early in these conversations rather than sort of an afterthought, right?
And William, let's jump to
some
of the hands raised. We've got a number of folks.
Thank you,
Andrea. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi. Hi. So actually, I'm the marketing and communication chair for our ERG Pride Network at Fetch, and I'm an ally. And I feel like there's a line between ownership and responsibility. And I think that as an ally coming in, I'm a straight woman. I had no idea what any of this meant. And our ERG started about approximately 3 years ago. And I make it my business to know what's going on within the community because I am a part of the community. I'm an ally and I take ownership of that. So that's the first thing. I think that if we are going to be involved in any way, that's the beginning, right? It starts with ownership, and it starts with becoming self-aware. It starts with paying attention, being sensitive, having empathy. It's a combination of all of those things on your end as a member of the community, as an ally. That I feel is your responsibility. On the other hand, what I find, the things that we've accomplished and some of the things that we had to really push, our HR department to do in terms of like healthcare and so on and so forth, because of our tenacity and because of our energy and what we wanted to make sure that we were doing in order to fulfill our promise to our community, our goals to the community. We also had to, as the chairs, the top, top tier of the ERG, we had to make sure that we took a stance and stand up for what we believed in. So I feel that when you have that sense of ownership, which it comes back to, and you know that this is something that I am passionate about, I care about these people, I love these people in my community, I am going to fight for you. And I am in my fight, I am going to also shift the culture within my company. And so that has been part one of my ultimate goal of what we're doing. In terms of the knowledge gap, like I said, once you start getting involved and learning things, and we have lunch and learns, we do, different panels and so on, you got to be present. That's how you fill the gap. You have to be present. You have to know what's going on. We put out I publish a lot of information on transgender. We do a days of visibility chart so that we can educate people within the community and outside of the community. So it's what you choose to design and what you choose to share, and doing it unapologetically and unafraid. You go out and you do what you have to do because you know that you're here to do something. And lastly, the other part of what I've learned about this community and what has been my goal is to create a safe space for people. And creating that safe haven for everyone, it allows people to feel free to say, you know what, I don't really understand that, including myself, or I'm not sure about that, and not to be criticized or not to be, taken for as like you're being condescending or anything, but knowing that you're in a safe space and that you're in a space of like learning, particularly for allies, because there are things, especially for me, there are lots of things that I didn't know, but I know quite a bit now, and it's because of my willingness to want to know. And I think that's how you fill the gap.
Thank you, Andrea. I love so much of all of that. And I think one thing that stands out, and then we'll get to some other hands, is ally is a verb, right? Like being an ally is an active role. And I think it's important to remember that it's not just a passive sitting back and providing support, but it's really getting in there, getting your hands dirty, and also that presence of mind and that humility to say, I don't know about that, but I want to know more, right? And I think that's really one of the things that drives that good education, that where you can start from a place of not knowing a whole lot, but then you start to get more and more, and then you get to a place where exactly you can start to, even as an ally, you can start to do that education on behalf of your siblings, really, which is where we want to be, right? Okay, so I know that we want to keep moving forward. Do we want to grab these hands right now, or would you like me to pass it off to the next topic? Ryan?
Let's go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry, you're the next topic.
I was gonna. Let's Maggie and Kenya, if you can drop your comments in the chat, or send them to one of us or all of us in the Pathable platform, that would be lovely. We've only got 20 minutes left, and we've got a few more things that we want to cover here today. So just in the interest of time, let's move on. And if we have time at the end, we can definitely have you jump in too. So William, I think, the education topic and like filling that knowledge gap really leads into what I'd like us to talk about now, and that's how do we manage risk, right? especially for Wells Fargo and especially for, other financial institutions or really any company, we need to manage risk both to the company, to our people, and to our communities that we're trying to lean in and do the work for. And, I think one of the biggest risks that we can see, like in creating environments where folks lean out or they don't feel like it's a safe space to know or to learn and to engage, is by not having everyone like having everyone be educated and know what they're talking about. And that if you don't know the realities of the communities that you're trying to impact, that creates risk, because you're going to go out and do something, either within your company or outside of your company for a community, and it's there's the potential for it to not only just be completely unnecessary, right? Something that the communities don't actually need. It's going to come off as very tone deaf and very ignorant of what actually are the needs and realities of the communities. And that can, besides doing or creating actual issues for, maybe operational legal risks like that, there is a severe reputational risk to doing this work wrong in 2021. And so it's a game where or it's a balance, right? It's something we have to figure out. How do we lean into the work and also be responsible? So that's kind of what we'd like to talk about here, is how are your organizations managing risk in this type of work? What things do you do to make sure that you're actually addressing the real needs of the community? And what happens if you fail? How do you address that? What happens if things go wrong? Because we're not all perfect. And
looks like
I
we've still got a hand raised here.
Yeah, Kenya, did you want to jump in here on this topic too?
And you'll need to unmute yourself, Kenya.
Hi, actually, my comment was actually based on the last question, so I can wait till later if that's okay.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Of course.
Since I'm not able to see the chat, Susie, Jeff, William, are you able to read off if we got any commentary in there?
The commentary around ally engagement chair is quite a bit of it at this point, not necessarily about managing risk across the various work streams.
For sure.
Go ahead, Ryan.
And I think, that's something, when we think about risk, like Wells Fargo's been in it, right? We've seen what's happened when we have leaders in our organization that are, potentially saying some really problematic things, both, whether it's about the LGBTQ plus community or, diverse other diverse communities. And it really has the power in kind of one fell swoop for an executive or someone at that level to say something that undermines a lot of the work that we do in our ERGs and in our DE&I practices in our organizations. And so, some of the things that we've worked on are really developing a couple committees in the LGBT that focus on different identities in the LGBTQ plus community. We've had one around bi plus identities. We still have a committee on trans, non-binary and intersex advocacy to really try to engage with that type of work and make sure that, folks have an understanding of the communities that they're working with. So Does anyone have any thoughts here? Because if you don't, we'll move on, or we can jump back to a couple folks that had comments on the last section.
Got
Andrea,
April
go
Mayserva
ahead.
in the chat says, I think managing risk starts with being humble and stating that you may not know it all, and if you learn something, thank your teacher. Agreed.
Yeah.
And I see a hand from Andrea as well as then Ed.
Yes, I actually, my answer was just really straightforward and quick. It was just, you know, to manage risk, I think it's important to network with those that know. And that way, through networking, I think you learn and you just you kind of safeguard yourself that way. Yeah, I mean, I think organization in that order is probably the best thing to do. And having someone that is the key go-to, like our global sponsor and our global chair, they're the two people that our ERG would mainly go to for things. Setting up something that's a little bit more organized would avoid that, you know, that sort of level of high risk, I believe. Well, that's how we do it, and it works.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome.
Ed.
Yeah, and mine is kind of, you know, I kind of have a story, but it kind of, you know, for me, the outcome of the story spoke to what our overall culture was, because we had one of our C-suite executives say something in a communication that went out to the organization, and it was insensitive. And I don't know that they knew necessarily that it was insensitive, or we didn't know if it was intentional or not. But what we did have is that we had a lead for the D&I program within our organization that we went to, and we said, hey, we saw this messaging and this is what it means to us. And I don't know if that, you know, was this intentional or is it not, because we've made a commitment to D&I, right, at the organization. And so we just want to know, what does this mean? And she took the messaging back to the C-suite executive and had a conversation and kind of used it as a teachable moment and say, look, this is what it meant to the community. It's, you know, people are questioning our, you know, our commitment. And so this is, you know, I just want to reaffirm with them that this is not. And so later there was a follow-up message around with an apology, really, and saying this is not the intent. And I think a lot of the times too, and I've seen it in several of the sessions here where we talk about, we have to assume positive intent with some of these things, right? And some of it is just innocent ignorance, right? And so I think if you go into it with that, a lot of these can turn into teachable moments, and you can educate. And so we had a really good outcome from that. And you know, there was a lot of visibility around it too. So it wasn't just where we went to that person, had a sidebar conversation, and they were the only ones that learned from it, right? In this particular instance, it was very visible to everybody, but it also reinforced the organization's commitment to, you know, DE&I.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ed, for sharing that. All right, let's go to Taylor, and then we will be moving on to our last topic.
Hey, y'all. So at my company, we have some great executive support. So we have very good communication with our executives and with our executive sponsors. We had some that flew in to Alabama from Virginia, DC area to attend our kickoff, just to make sure that everyone here knew that, you know, this has the support of executive leadership. Kind of get on the train, or, you know, be quiet, pretty much. Not exactly like that, obviously, nicer, but we actually did have someone approach the CEO when he came to visit once. He's very approachable, loves talking to people, and they expressed concern based on their religious identity that this was not the direction he wanted a company to head in. And our CEO just responded with one of the best things I've ever heard. And he's like, there's room for everyone under the tent. You know, we're not here to exclude you based on pride. You know, this is what we want, everyone to be here under this tent. It's about inclusion, and we're not trying to disclude you because of your thoughts on pride. But if you want to have more of a conversation about that, please reach out to me. And so just opening up that conversation, because, being in Alabama, it is, we face a lot of issues from religious groups and political parties that do not agree with what we're doing. But just being able to respond to them and open up that conversation for later has really gotten us pushed forward. And I mean, we still have a ways to go. And a lot of people think that we're pushing the barriers too fast. But then again, the barriers were much further back than they are elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's really good insight. Thank you, Taylor. All right. And now let's shift over. Jeff, you're going to take us through our last topic.
Yeah. And we have about 9 minutes or so left. So this one, I think we've covered some of this already in the discussion and things I've seen in the chat. But, so as we said, we have all these groups and a lot of folks are working on the same initiatives, particularly, like during June, right? There's lots of stuff happening at the enterprise level. There's a lot of stuff happening in our ERG, communications, marketing, et cetera. So how do you balance that work across the groups? And here, we're looking for it. We're interested in if anybody has any real tactical ideas, right? How do you prioritize things if there's, so many efforts that folks want to do? Are there routines that you have, certain meetings that occur between these various parties? Or is there reporting, that happens to make sure everyone's aware? I've seen several comments about social media platforms and things. How do you divide the work? Are there kind of buckets that, the ERG only works on this kind of stuff and DE&I only works on this other kind of stuff, right? Does anybody have anything structured like that? So again, looking for just tactical ideas, suggestions, any roadblocks anyone's seen that they'd be willing to share. And I see some hands. I'm going to ask people to unmute. And April, why don't we start with you?
Hi. It's not exactly structured for us yet, but it is something that we've started thinking about this year. Basically, what we're starting is we've got our enterprise ERGs and then our local ERGs or inclusion networks. And what we've started doing is when it's not like Pride Month, the Pride group will offer their assistance to the visibility for mental health awareness and say, hey, and we know it's a lot of work to plan for your celebration month. How can we help you? So that we're because National Coming Out Day is coming up next week, and we've got all kinds of things we wanted to do, but we also didn't want to step on their toes. And we had a really successful Pride Month, so we also didn't want to oversaturate everybody. So the other thing that we do was the individual inclusion networks and local ERGs will check in with the enterprise to see, okay, we want to do this. Is this aligning with our corporate plan? So that's it's still a work in progress, but that's about where we're at right now.
No, I appreciate the feedback. And then Corey, I see your hand is raised. So why don't we turn it to you next?
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
All right, perfect. So thank you. As soon as I saw this, I thought recently for our company, I'm a co-chair of our local LGBT network. And of course, we have our ultimate company-wide enterprise level DIY, which we rely on a lot. Recently, what they've created is almost a middle line where what they've done is put all of our local chapters in different segments, and they purposely joined segments that have, bigger populations with ones that are smaller, so we get a little bit of diversity, and then also all over the country. So I know I'm in Scranton, Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania. I'm with a segment with people in Texas, with people in Hawaii, with people in Chicago. And what we've taken from it is balancing that workload where, especially because everything's virtual now anyway, when the Chicago chapter is hosting a LGBT movie night where everyone who has an Netflix can watch the same movie, and then they come together and have a group discussion on it. We can participate in that now, right? So it's not just our small local chapter that are having these smaller events, that there's a lot of work that goes into them. Now we can kind of bond, right, and join with our other regions across the nation, and join with them and balance that workload. Also balancing the workload with the different ERGs. And I know it's kind of already been talked about, but at our company, we have our Black professionals group, we have our disability advocacy group, we have our Lead for Women group. And although they might not all be, around, let's say, Pride Month doing something, there's different things that they do that we can absolutely join in on, or part of the mission of equality and inclusiveness. So just, working with other ERG groups, and then also creating that middle ground of in between company-wide enterprise ERG and then local, that middle support group where they're really bringing us together and helping us in a virtual world rely on each other. Takes a lot of the pressure off your individual group.
Great insights. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. So anybody have any other comments on this particular item before we kind of move to wrap up?
And we will be capturing and saving the text chat. So if we don't call out things that have been said, we will be taking a look at that.
All right, I see Cypress has a hand raised. All right.
Hi there. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. This is particularly important for the ERG and networks at my business. And one of the things that I noticed is I had a real resistance from my manager to use the energy that I had in my affinity groups. And when I really came down to it, just recording how many hours or minutes that I actually put into the group, really focused that it wasn't that much energy. And we talk about working smarter, not harder. And when we pull together our ERGs, we realize, as some of you have already said, we're pulling the same cart. We're still going for the same goals. So why not be co-hosts and do joint ventures together so that we have a larger breadth of people that will come to the events and have higher visibility with senior leadership. So all of this is a platform of, you start with your ERG, then you go to a diversity council, and that's another level of leadership. And you just start managing your career that way, of having increased visibility and having more recognition of the things that you do, which allows, as a business strategy, it allows our senior leaders to say, hey, this is a positive gain for our company, and then start creating a real space with our managers to make room for us to keep growing and serve our customers.
Well, I don't think we could end it on a better closing comment than that. So thank you for sharing all of that. Susie, Ryan, William, any other parting thoughts in our last minute?
Just a note of appreciation to all of you for your candor and for sharing your good and your bad and your ugly too. I think that's really what the intent was for today. And I think we've got some terrific ideas and warnings and alerts that we need to be aware of. So looking forward to bringing all of that together and sharing it back with each of you. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
No, you're just fine. I was just gonna do the official closeout of thanks everyone for participating, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone in sessions later today or in the closing sessions later this evening.
Yep.
Thanks everyone.
Enjoy. Bye, everybody.